Okay, welcome to Phil Tech Hour, where we believe there is a will, there is a way. My name is Dr. Philip Hickman, and we have a special guest in the house today. Sandy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, well, thank you, and it's great to be here. My name is Sandee Kastrul. I'm the president and co-founder of IC Stars. We find talent, train talent, and put talent to work in IT careers.
Okay, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that. I want you to tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So, probably not the typical background you see for technology CEOs, but I think an important one all the same. So, I was a school teacher. I taught math and science, and I also had the terrific opportunity to work with new teachers and train teachers around curriculum development and diversity. And so I got to work across the Midwest
Okay.
and, worked with kids and teachers in rural communities, very urban communities, and suburban communities. And honestly, the thing that I saw, or my hypothesis, was really that, the more adversity that kids had faced, the more resilient they were, and that from facing adversity you develop this resiliency toolkit, and it has creative thinking and reciprocity and critical thinking skills and chutzpah. And so my sort of path as an educator was around making these folks visible as not just great learners but great leaders and the future of our communities. And so investing in harnessing that resiliency as a way to learn, and to develop people, was sort of my mission. And so, for years I did that, and that's kind of what led me to founding IC Stars.
That's an interesting point that you just touched on. I myself have a education background. I started actually worked in every aspect of education, from the classroom all the way up to principal, assistant superintendent, and superintendent. And one of the things that I often heard was that we have to teach these inner city kids resiliency, and we have to, make them kind of learn that soft skills. And I actually found that was a contradiction. I mean,
Yeah.
kids, they face adversity on a daily basis and overcome obstacles. They are resilient and persevere through all of this. And some of the stuff that they persevere through, that they have grit that some of us adults would not be able to tackle and overcome. So, I appreciate that. But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, so that's what you notice with the children out there. Am I correct?
Absolutely, and I think that's spot on. That the narrative around our kids is completely different than the reality or the truth.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, as a math teacher, I would hear all the time, well, these kids can't do higher math, and you're going to have a hard time doing this. And my thought was, are you kidding me? Like, these kids live math. Figuring
Right.
out, right, like the probabilities of getting home safely every single day is a part of your daily existence. I mean, don't tell me you can't do math, right? Like, for most of us, getting to school safely is an algebraic equation, right? And figuring out what are the unwanted variables between here and there, I mean, that's some active math. So really all we're doing as teachers is providing a new level of language to apply to their already very mathematical experience.
Right. Yeah. I wrote a book called Stop Dribbling Footballs, and it's the same thing. It's basically what it talks about is teaching kids the rules of the game.
Yes.
Because it talks about a boy named Joe that grew up in the era of basketball, and that's what all was in his home. Then he went to a new game, which theoretically was school,
Mm.
and that game was everybody wore football pads, and that game was kind of football, and he kept dribbling the football and was getting yelled at and those kind of things. And so it's the same thing. It's really giving our kids a blueprint,
Yeah.
to be successful, because they have all the skills that one will require to kind of go through a workforce and persevere and be successful, but they're just kind of playing the game with different rules. And like you said, to harness that resiliency. And so let's get into what was your dream job growing up?
What a great question. I love it. Honestly, I wanted to be a singer. I would have the hairbrush in my room, like singing, and also a bus driver.
Okay.
And so I'd like line up all the chairs in my house and make my dad kind of get on the bus and pay his tickets. Um, and a school teacher.
Wow.
So those are like my three things. And I'll tell you what, I would say today I still do all three of those things. Like sometimes there's no other better way to express something than to just sing your truth.
Right. Okay.
Um, and I feel as a founder and as a CEO, we're many times driving a bus,
Right.
making sure that we know where the bus is going, and that people feel like they're a part of something. So there's and we're going somewhere. We're driving towards that vision. And then, of course, I don't teach nearly as much as I used to. I still love the classroom. I love the idea of leading people out. And I think that, no matter what it is that I'm doing, whether I'm in a sales meeting, whether I am, giving a lecture or talking to a group of executives, I'm still always teaching. You can take the girl out of the classroom, but you can't take the classroom out of the girl.
Well, you're right, and you have an awesome responsibility, and so that kind of leads us to our next question: is what keeps you up at night?
Hmm. Well, IC Stars is growing. We're scaling, and we are in three cities now, and working, of course, on Kansas City. And I think that so scale is sort of the thing closest to mind, and I believe that kind of my up at night moments are around how do we scale culture. Um, how do we make sure that not just our principles and values are in every city, but that the way we feel as we get on the bus is powerful, is consistent, and as we like to say that everyone who sort of touches IC Stars feels as if they are being seen.
Wow. So, so can you expand a little bit more on why I see stars and tell us a little bit about it?
So, this was we founded the organization in the late '90s. And so if you can remember the late '90s, it was a different time, right? The world had been declared flat. Um, we had a proliferation of startups, or back then they were called dot coms, right? The internet was exploding, and everybody had like such and such dot com. There was a shortage of technology workers because with all of this, we needed people who could make websites for companies that were just starting, to be on the web. Um, and so, there was a tremendous opportunity from a demand standpoint. And then, as I think about the kids that I had worked with over a decade in education, um, I wanted to not only provide kids with an opportunity to be a part of the economic mainstream and to get jobs in technology, but I love technology because it's creative. It doesn't matter what you look like, it shouldn't. And that at the end of the day, the systems thinking and process and methodology that's embedded in doing technology work can be an awesome blueprint for developing community leaders.
Wow.
So, at the end of the day, IT is about solving problems and building solutions. And so the big question was, well, what if that blueprint that we use for not only getting folks great jobs and being successful on the job of solving problems and building solutions, but what if we didn't stop there? What if we applied those same skills of solving problems and building solutions to develop community leaders? And that was sort of the two ends, right? Like IT, get great jobs, do great things, build awesome stuff, and that there's social justice in that, right? Like we shift from being consumers to being makers. But that even deeper, and I think part of our secret sauce is around how we're developing community leaders from within. So, I think we're all tired in our communities of waiting for other people to come in and solve our problems. And that there's a desperate need for us to solve them ourselves. And so, asking ourselves the question, what if we define success not by getting out of the hood, but by investing back in? How would that change things? If we developed business leaders and entrepreneurs who were starting businesses and hiring for the community, if we developed service leaders who were teaching and coaching and mentoring folks in the community and being visible, and if we were developing civic leaders who were addressing things from a policy level and changing things at policy and systems level that are impacting our communities. And so that's sort of what we set out to do almost 20 years ago. And today like I said, we're scaling and growing into new markets and new cities to develop more leaders, more programmers, more analysts. But more than anything else, I think it's about our ability to connect communities.
Right. You mentioned something interesting because you talked about the dot-com era, and there was a big crash in there, and yet, you guys were resilient in a sense, and you guys withstood that. Help me understand, what was some of your processes, and how did you pivot through that tough time
Yeah.
in order to continue on the success that you are and rebuilding the community that you're doing?
Yeah. Great question. So, it was our first cycle started in 2000, and 100% placement. Everybody went to go work at dot-coms. They rode around on scooters. They ate Pop-Tarts all day, and then something.
Did you say Pop-Tarts all day?
Yeah, I did. I totally Pop-Tarts, right? Chocolate Pop-Tarts. It was the thing.
Right.
And, one of the very magical and special aspects of our culture is that every day at 4 o'clock we have high tea. So everything stops. We sit around at a conference table, and we have a different business leader come in and share their journey with our cohort. And it's powerful because, IC Stars is 12 hours a day. It is intensive. You're doing real project work for real clients. And that this hour of tea is really our pause for reflection. And so, one of the things we started to notice, one of the themes, was that entrepreneurs were coming in and sort of telling their story, but as we're sort of analyzing the business model, it's not really adding up. And we talked a lot about sustainability and what that looks like, in our careers, in our entrepreneurship, and so we were starting to see the writing on the wall, just from that perspective. And so, thinking ahead, we said, well, what if, we did do a pivot, but it was more about, who cares about the work that we do? And then who cares about who cares? So we found out that it was CIOs that cared, because many of them didn't grow up in technology. Maybe they grew up in finance or somewhere else, and they had to go through these boot camps, 10, 20, 30 years ago, to learn systems thinking and mainframe computing and all of those things. And so they went through boot camps. And so when they sort of came and experienced IC Stars, they were like, oh, yes, absolutely. This is how I learned. It's a powerful model. And I want to support that. And then we realized very quickly that the CIOs were the buyers of technology. And who cares about the CIOs who care? Well, every technology service provider cares, because those are their customers.
Right.
And so if we could create a flywheel where we were bringing in CIOs and then leveraging that network to then attract technology service providers who would be our employers, our sponsors, et cetera, we would have a very powerful business model to, as we thought during that time, sort of ride out this change in the .com space. And
Wow.
so
So,
that's how we were able to pivot. Yep.
and that's important. I mean, those are important shifts in thinking and really providing for a need. Help me understand some of the misconceptions is that you are just teaching program, and I hear you talk about leadership, and so also um, one is kind of allude us to some of the things that you are embedding in our students, and the other thing is why focus on leadership.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important question. So the easy thing to think about, if you and at the top of this conversation, I talked about we find talent, we train talent, and put talent to work.
Right.
Like that's the capsule that everyone understands. Okay, sure. Little known fact, we're actually the first boot camp for IT in Chicago, right? Because if you think 20 years ago, and if people want to think like, okay, is this reasonable? Is this doable? Is it practical? Well, teaching technology and programming skills is reasonable and practical. And the challenge was kind of like back to my math days. Well, gosh, will inner city kids be able to be programmers? I mean, that's, and of course, my answer is you betcha. And there was a lot of pressure to not necessarily teach programming. It was maybe hardware, maybe break and fix, maybe help desk kind of things,
Right.
or graphic design, or those things which are absolutely great areas of technology, but where we could see the growth was in the development side. So, if we just stopped there, we would be like DeVry. We would be a technical school, and that would be perfectly fine. But in our view, there were lots of those organizations and schools. And that what's unique is that this idea of developing leaders, people with a bigger than you sensibility, a passion for technology, an aptitude for solving big problems, not just at work, but outside of work, was really quite a powerful way to not only teach technology skills, right? Because now it's about service, it's about how do we lead, it's about how do we grow. But then also, in those late hours when we're trying to solve a bug that seems like I'm never going to get this, it's the notion that in not just doing this for this bug or for this job, it's always about something bigger. And that's what sort of taps into our resilience and our perseverance and allows us to not only complete something, but to do it with a standard of excellence because each one of us impacts 1,000. And there are enough folks in our world today who are just worried about kind of themselves and what they're going to get, that if we develop leaders who are focused on everybody else, including themselves, and not what they're going to get, but what they're going to give, we are developing amazing business people who will not just survive but thrive, and amazing community leaders who won't give up. So one of the things we measure is home ownership. So in our group of just under 500 graduates, we have close to 60 homeowners.
Wow.
And I mean, we are so proud of that because we're talking about folks who are receiving public assistance who now are homeowners and are part of local school councils. And again, they're saying, and half of them are saying, I'm purchasing a home in the community that I came from, even if that means I'm commuting 2 hours to go and work at Allstate, because I want to be visible. I want to be a service leader, and I want to show other people that there's another way. That geek is kind of chic. um, so, so yeah, I think all in, it creates this 360-degree application of problem solving, solution building, and leadership, and that technology is really just a tool that we use across the board.
Okay. So help me understand when someone says, okay, 12-hour days. how do you how do you grasp the attention of someone in a 12-hour day? And I take it as not purely instructional, meaning that it's project based. It's not lecture style instruction the whole time. But Sandee, 12-hour days. Explain to me, help me understand the structure of the program. Just a kind of a overview of that.
Sure. And first, I have to tell you, like, as an educator, we hear 12-hour days and we're both loving it and hating it, right? Like, on one hand, it's like an educator's playground. You've got 12 concentrated hours to fill with, but on the other hand, it's like, come on, like, what on earth? Who's got 12 hours, And we also have a really rigorous, like, you can't be late or absent or you're fired.
High standards.
Very high standards. And these things are really important because it not only takes us out of an environment for 12 hours a day, it forces a huge amount of commitment, and investment versus sacrifice, right? Because investment is what we're giving to the future, sacrifice is what we feel like we're giving up, and so for us, this immersive learning environment meant that we could, not only maximize the time and everything else, but to really think about what does it mean to see yourself as a technologist, and that the so deep that we need 12 hours a day to sort of eat, breathe, and sleep it, right? So what it looks like is that we do like a week, probably 40 hours of curriculum that's focused on leadership, trust building, cross-cultural communication, and learning styles and management styles and all of that great stuff. And then that Friday, the cohort of 20, they're divided up into 4 teams. They form their own consulting companies, and then they're competing with each other for this RFP from their client.
Wow.
So basically, it's an RFP that says, solve this business problem using technology. And it's awesome. So like that Monday, everything starts. They go to their first client meeting, and it's really quite powerful. I would say that the average intern in our program may understand 10 to 15% of what the client is saying, right? Like language, they're talking in acronyms, they're talking about systems, like what on earth, right? And that the model works so that it's a post-teaching method. So after the meeting, then their program manager kind of goes to the whiteboard and says, okay, what was that about? How did what did they mean when they said this? And the client is the one who gives them the deliverable. So like in a week, we'd like to see your wireframes, and they should, and like these are all new words. I don't even know what that means. So then they've got to figure out, okay, how do I research this? How do I go? And how do I, just like we do at work. Like just because we don't know something doesn't mean we don't do it. It means that we figure it out, right? And that the fundamental core belief in our pedagogy is that resilient and talented people, kind of like you said earlier, already have the skills, the resiliency and the reciprocity and critical thinking skills. We're really just providing a context for them to unpack those skills.
There you go. And
and so all kinds of things like, oops, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You said a lot. That was good.
Okay. And I would just add that, the software that they develop is real, right? So for the past few years, it's been mobile app development for companies like Kraft, Accenture, Chase, but that we script the leadership piece. So, for example, there's a really we bake about 300 learning objectives into this project. So, the second client meeting, the teams are all coming to present their wireframes, to ask questions, and what we've scripted is that a fight will break out between business and IT, and we script it differently for each client. It sort of mimics or makes very very clear their sort of cultural norms. And they love it on the client side because they get to act all like what, all right, it's very fun. But the teams have to decide in that moment, okay, what do we do? Do we mediate? Do we moderate? Or do we just let the loudest person win? And inevitably, you'll have teams who are just kind of be like, I'm not going to say anything. Let these people, and there's all of those kind of things about like, how am I the expert in this situation? And how do I embrace being a consultant, that I'm being hired to actually solve this problem, not just take notes and give them what they ask for? How do I become consultative? And so, back at the whiteboard after this meeting, their program manager is going to talk about, okay, did you build trust and credibility with your client today? Did you defend your client? And then, there's a XY axis where everybody kind of figures out which quadrant they are in. And there's a whole rubric to see where you are. And that's kind of when the learning begins, when we have an experience, for good or bad, that sticks with us in our head and our hearts. And then we begin to say, okay, for next time, here's what I'm going to do. So, if you came to visit us, you'd see it looks like any other software development company, except that at 4 o'clock we stop and have tea. And then in the evenings, we have subject matter experts and what we call night school. They're teaching fundamentals of programming to coincide with what it is that they're building.
Wow, that's very powerful. And you have a lot there. So that's very non-traditional.
Yeah.
And coming from a teacher background, I'm surprised. But proud, very proud, because that is very futuristic in thinking, and especially since you talked about that this was started back in the early '90s. The question that I have is, how do you measure success? I mean, there's a lot there, project-based learning. You have a lot of adult learning theory there, where adults learn through reflection and those kind of things. How do you measure success?
Yeah, so we measure everything, right? So I think it's easy is on the hard skill, quote unquote, like the technology, right? Like, because technology is pretty binary, right? Like, it works or it doesn't. And the leadership is, and I hear this all the time, like, well, you can't measure leadership, especially early on. And I think that that's kind of bull, right? Like, if you can draft the objectives, you can measure how well we're achieving them. So, an example is, we really will measure reciprocity through the ability to give gifts. And so our leadership curriculum is designed around this notion of gift giving and receive. It is really powerful and beautiful curriculum. And it's that thing that's leadership is what you do when no one else is looking.
Right.
And in really practical terms, we believe that leadership is making opportunities for others. Like, just that simple. And so, we can measure how many opportunities people make, right? Like in business and in community. But we can even measure how powerful tea is, right? So, my office is like just down the hall from the studio where all the magic happens. And, if one of the powerful things about high tea is that, executives are coming in and they're expecting to see like 20 people in hoodies who are like, yo, we code, right? Like, but instead they're like, holy cow, these guys ask better questions than my management team.
Right.
So how do I hire from IC Stars? How do I get my team engaged? And how do I support this organization? So I know if the tea speaker makes a beeline for my office, that they have killed it in the tea. And then if we're able to convert those tea speakers to coming to on-site interviews, and then how many folks they hire, that's directly related to how they made opportunities in that tea. That was ground zero.
Wow. Wow. That's
yeah.
Tell me, where is IC Stars located, and where do you plan to expand? I mean, we all have to have this in our community, so I want to know.
Sure. So we are headquartered in Chicago. This is where we started. We have an office in Columbus, Ohio, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And what we're really, really excited about is Kansas City. So we
Okay.
are right now in the midst of doing a feasibility study, talking to corporate partners and community partners, and really kind of understanding what's the demand for technology workers, and what does the community side look like in terms of what are the leadership challenges, that specific challenges in Kansas City that we can develop leaders to address.
Right. And it's we have about 3,000 jobs unfilled in the tech era, and we have a great community here in Kansas City, and we do have an underserved population that has been marginally ignored, and this is a great opportunity. I know for some of my folks in Kansas City and my family as well. Because this is an opportunity to really be able to turn communities around into successful communities, which fuel the economy. And we have a lot of great things going on in Kansas City, especially a growing technology population. The last thing that I
Yeah.
want to ask is, what do you believe the future trends are in technology, and where do you see IC Stars fitting in there?
Yeah. Great question, because one of the most beautiful things about technology and what I really geek out on is this notion of change, right? It's all about change, right? It changes every year, every quarter, kind of what's new, what's hot. We constantly have to learn and relearn, and so teaching folks at its core how to learn and relearn things, and then how to really love learning is really cool. Now, like, add in change, right? So we talk all the time about being a change agent, and I think that there's two sides to that. Like, technologists are change agents in business, right? Like, basically what you're doing is selling change through ideas, like this system is going to change this, and here's why we need it. But then also, we have agents of change in the communities that we come from. And so this is reversing these vicious cycles that we see playing over and over again, that, destroy opportunities for us to be a part of the economic mainstream. So that being said, I think, you know, um, it, all of the kind of cool things like blockchain and artificial intelligence, and all of that is here. It's coming. It's going to be amplified, and we're going to find reasons to apply these things into greater global contexts, and that's really exciting. But I think, to me, the 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 really powerful thing is about diversity, and how we can no longer build things in a vacuum. And if we don't have the diversity of perspective from folks, we are limiting our growth and our sustainability. And so we hear all the time these stories about, companies that haven't embraced diversity, and like they are shrinking while growing, because sooner or later they run out of solution, because they're only building things for 10% of the global population.
Wow. Say,
And
if I would have thought you were my sister or twin or something. I mean, seriously, the words that you're saying are things that, I learned in school and things that I echo all the time. I mean, even my background as a psychologist, a long time ago, it said the new form of intelligence, new form of IQ will be the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because, technology has
yep,
less than a year shelf life. I mean, you can get a new iPhone
yeah,
update every 8 months. And so just to have that ability to do that it's second to none. I mean, it's very important. Um, and like you said, just to be a change agent and within the community and to kind of reverse that vicious cycles. You're saying some powerful things, Sandy. You are a great leader, and you're having a great impact on societies. And you know, as a servant leader, I don't have an award. I know you recently won an award, but if I was handing out awards, I will personally hand you one. I mean, you are brilliant, and what you're doing is a great service.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on Phil Tech Hour. You know, we really enjoyed having you and want to hear more from you. And we're watching and let us know how we can support in any way your success because your success means the success of communities. And so we really are behind IC Stars and we're just happy that you're coming to Kansas City and other communities as well. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be a part of this. And, I think you're the cat's pajamas. So thanks for letting me be a part of this.
No problem. Thank you, Sandy, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay, take care.
All right. Bye bye.